Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Hillier Investigates. I have quite a tale for you tonight. If you are viewing this on YouTube, please like and subscribe. I know you hear that every time, every video that you watch, but it does take a shit ton of research and effort to put these videos together for you. There have been a plethora of events that have occurred recently which demonstrate the catastrophic mismanagement of the Liberal government, but there is one that keeps resurfacing for me, and it runs parallel to Mark Carney's innate ability to hover within inches of triggering legal liability, and that is China. We are going to go through a very egregious timeline and connect key figures, and I'm going to demonstrate an intent and execution that you had no idea that exists, and I'm going to show you exactly what the Liberals did to make sure that you would never find out. January 6, 2026, Mark Carney landed in Beijing. This is the first Prime Minister's visit to China since 2017. Coincidentally, that is the exact same year that Censorship was created. That new branch created under the Liberal government comes with a lifetime non-disclosure agreement, up to life in prison, immediate prosecution, and up to $1 million in fines. It effectively hides all foreign interference from the public perpetually and indefinitely. NSIRA was also tabled in 2017 and passed in 2019. This was another branch that the Liberals created, which gave them unfettered access to classified documents from Canadian intelligence, RCMP, CSE, and so forth. The opposition, conservatives, cannot access those classified documents. They can get security clearance for Censorship, but that is practically a gag order because any information you receive through Censorship cannot be shared with anyone. Carney's visit to China included meetings with the very top of China's one-party state, including President Xi Jinping and the Premier. Here is what makes the timing so explosive. Canada's most important trade deal, the USMCA, is up for renewal in July. That is a mandatory joint review between Mexico, the US, and Canada. This will establish if that deal continues, is terminated, or terms renegotiated. And at the same time, the United States treats China as its most serious strategic competitor and its greatest threat to US security, as cited by the CIA. So the question is not, should Canada trade with China? Because we do. The question is, why now? And what very obvious pattern are you missing because you cannot see the information that is hidden? Who is China? Because I am flabbergasted that most of you have no idea. It is a technological powerhouse with a massive population. But China is not a normal government that just happens to be communist. It is a party state, a system where the Chinese Communist Party, the CCP, sits above the state, above the courts, above any individual. Many experts as of 2026 refer to it as a fascist structure more so than pure authoritarian. The real center of power is not a parliamentary style debate like we have here in Canada. It's CCP's top leadership, including its elite decision-making core, and that core never changes. Economically, China operates a state-directed model. Massive industrial capacity, heavy state influence, and a system built to convert national strategy into corporate policy. It is a machine. This matters because when you negotiate with Beijing, you're not negotiating with a normal government that is constrained by elections, opposition, and independent courts. You are negotiating with a centralized system designed to protect the party first. And as ex-CIA agent John Karaku stated, the reason why they are so dangerous is because they will outlast every president and every prime minister we ever put in place. As such, they are known for extraordinary patience and will facilitate infiltration that spans quite literally decades. They are home to some of the most egregious actions toward their own people. Not to mention, they are the #1 CO2 polluter on the entire planet, exceeding 35% of the total output. In Xinjiang, UN Human Rights Office assessed catastrophic human rights violations and documented widespread arrest, coercive policy, disappearances, and stated that these violations may very well constitute as crimes against humanity. Our own Liberal government utilized the Emergency Act against peaceful protesters, which the courts have since deemed as illegal. This was formerly known as the Wartime Act, which means it was for wartime. Mark Carney was reported by the Toronto Sun supporting this initiative just days before it was used, also supporting the freezing of bank accounts. This mentality starts to look similar of how China started their suppression. In the 1990s, protests erupted across China, which resulted in the very famous and well-known Tiananmen massacre. Declassified British documents estimate the death toll to exceed 10,000. If you've never seen the very famous photo, Tank Man, that is the photo of a lone Chinese protester standing unarmed in front of a tank. Subsequently, they were just running people over and shooting them dead in the streets. Executions were carried out for weeks, hundreds of arrests, people run over by vehicles and shot dead. This is heavily censored in China and forbidden to be discussed in mainland China. All related keywords, phrases, images, and videos are blocked in real time. Let me remind you that CCP owns a golden share in ByteDance, which is the company that owns TikTok. They have direct access to the algorithm, which reaches over 17 million Canadians. You are standing directly in the backyard to China's influence every time you use that application. When I say algorithms, I mean they have unfettered access to monitor your data, personality, exposure, and adjust what you see in real time, which is catastrophic when you find out what their motive is. Keep that in mind if you ever think their electric vehicles are not a security threat, because they are. In Hong Kong, Beijing's national security law criminalized broad categories of speech and political activity, with penalties up to life in prison. Sound familiar? Because the UK has that, and they are slowly implementing it here. These extreme penalties were strengthened over time starting in 2003. Again, June 2020 and March 2023 saw significant increase to that law. Note that we ourselves saw Bill C-10 Broadcasting Act online streaming tabled in 2020, Bill C-11 Online Streaming Act tabled in 2023, and Bill C-63 and C-36, the Online Harms Act, almost parallel to China's increase, and at the exact same time that Mark Carney was the economic advisor to Justin Trudeau. This runs similarly to China's initial building phase designed to protect democracy, children, journalism, regulate platforms, distribution, and visibility. Sound familiar? So at the exact same time that the Liberals were tabling censorship bills under Mark Carney's advisory, China was also strengthening theirs. Now, they don't just completely censor you. You can disappear and they will flood their own narratives from your birth to your death, spoon-feeding you propaganda. Sure, come on in, we'll do business with you. China is a digital police state. Freedom House has documented China as being one of the worst environments in the entire world for internet freedom, with severe repercussions for online speech and deep government control. China will embed itself into other countries in ways you cannot fathom. 42% of international surrogates in the U.S. are Chinese. There are Chinese elites fathering over 100 children as mega families in the U.S. And under the 14th Amendment, when they turn 21, they can sponsor a parent for a green card. It is not about cheap electric cars. It is about world domination, and they have the patience and the technology and the know-how to do it. So this is the character and the regime Canada's Prime Minister chose to engage with at the highest level, right before our most important trade deal came up for renewal. And when I say most important trade deal, please understand that the United States collects 75% of our total export at a 15 to 20% bonus because it's cheaper to ship across land. China collects 3.4%. Understand that Canada needs to treat the United States, who is directly across the largest trading border on Earth, as a partner indefinitely, regardless of who is in office, because destroying that trade route is economic suicide. Any economist will tell you that, save for one. Mark Carney has a PhD in economics, and I know he knows this. So why, pray tell, is he convincing you otherwise? I'm not saying don't trade with China. I'm saying what you trade and when you trade matters exponentially when your government has repeatedly failed to negotiate trade with our biggest trading partner. I'll explain to you why that is in just a minute. So how big of a threat is China? July 7, 2020, FBI Director Christopher Wray, the greatest long-term threat to U.S. information, IP, and economic vitality comes from China's espionage and counterintelligence threat. October 7, 2021, CIA Director William Burns launched a China Mission Center and called the Chinese government the most important geopolitical threat of the 21st century. That's the CIA director. October 2022, the U.S. National Security described the People's Republic of China the only competitor with both the intent and means to reshape the international order. Take a pause and remember Mark Carney's ominous statement when he was negotiating trade with China.
The progress that we have made in the partnership sets us up well for the new world order.
The new world order. And what about Canada? They are all over us. 2021, the Canadian intelligence published a bulletin outlining that the Trump narrative actually originated with the Chinese Communist Party. They were openly seeking to align conservatives with Trump, calling them Trumpian. I have those classified documents on my desk. They ran massive campaigns to this effect. They have full unfettered access to TikTok. This has been going on for a decade and you didn't even know because it's been hidden behind the liberal branch, NSCOP. And the liberals had access to this, so the entire time they knew, and they actually leveraged a Chinese-born narrative to divide and conquer and win the election, and they are still using it. March 1st, 2023, Canada's National Security Advisor told the committee the greatest foreign interference threat to Canada comes from the People's Republic of China. That is sequence. May 7th, 2024, CSIS publicly said that China has interfered with the 2019 and 2020 election and the 2025 election. April 7, 2025, SITE, S-I-T-E, reported campaigns on China's largest social networks, WeChat, TikTok, supporting the liberals and Trumpifying the conservatives. 10 days later, when this information was publicized, is when Mark Carney stated that China is the greatest security threat to Canada. That was not an honest admission. That was damage control to distance himself from the problem. And I'm going to show you how close he was to China before he even came to run for office. Canadian intelligence also warned that China's interference does not stop at Parliament. As stated in documents, they have been interfering in every level of our government. It is catastrophic, and you have no idea about it. A national inquiry reported that multiple countries interfered with our democratic institutions, but China was identified as the most active by a large margin. These are just small stories that are seeping through the cracks that we're hearing. I cannot fathom what is hidden behind that lifetime non-disclosure agreement. Let me give you an example of Mark's allegiance to China. January 2025, Liberal candidate Paul Chang openly suggested that his conservative opposition would be abducted and delivered to the consulate for a bounty. I would have certainly assumed that they would have killed him had that happened. Carney was questioned repeatedly by reporters asking Paul Chang to have stepped down, but Carney said it was a teachable moment and refused to remove him. The RCMP started an investigation and Paul Chang stepped out on his own, only to be replaced with Peter Hewen, who had even stronger ties to the CCP. A commission exhibit states that Canadian intelligence indicated that Beijing officials had traveled to Canada to threaten and intimidate Chinese Canadians and permanent residents. This goes on and on and on. Carney's 2025 victory happened in an election climate dominated by the Trump factor. Tariffs, threats, sovereignty, panic, all causing division. This rhetoric was echoed through legacy media. Now remember, there is commissioned evidence that PRC-linked actors aimed to defeat conservatives by portraying them as aligned with Donald Trump, even suggesting that conservatives would follow the lead of Trump. So ask yourself, when a narrative like that explodes across the country, who benefits? It's unbelievable to see that narrative at scale when I know it originated with the Chinese Communist Party. It is mind-blowing. Now that you can see all this, now that you understand China is not someone that you deal with, that our most important trading partner is the US, and we've failed with negotiations with the US perpetually, I'm going to put a big red bow on Mark's head. Carney was in bed with China long before 2025. In fact, when he was working as Trudeau's advisor and vice chair at Brookfield, he had deep ties with China. December 2017, Beijing, Carney attended inaugural joint research symposium in China. December 2017, Ukina Economic and Financial Dialogue, chaired by Mark Carney and Zhou Xiaochuan, held bilateral central banking meeting with Mark Carney. March 22nd, 2024, China's State Administration of Foreign Exchange, SAFE, records a meeting between Zhu Haoxin and Mark Carney via Brookfield. March 26, 27, 2024, Carney met with Xi Jinping and foreign business leaders in Beijing at the Great Hall of Leaders. October 19, 2024, second meeting with Zhou Haoxin discussing finance and industry conditions. October 20, 2024, Beijing's Mayor Yin Yang discussed investment climate surrounding Brookfield's fund management and infrastructure investment. Shortly after this, in November, Brookfield acquires a $270 million loan through Beijing, $700 million offshore to be refinanced, and up to and exceeding $900 million in new commitments. Brookfield now that same month makes public the move for headquarters from Ontario to New York. And Brookfield executed this move weeks before the election ended. Carney was questioned during the campaign about his alleged connections to Beijing and pro-Beijing groups. I quote, "Never heard of them. Check your sources." Place that next to the documented record 2024 meeting with senior Chinese officials is factually lying to your face. And now I will explain to you why all of this leads me to a very acute, detrimental conclusion. Liberals have won a minority government. They need a majority at all costs. They have one of the best election engineering companies in the entire world working for them. And China, who is extraordinarily proficient at psychological manipulation. How doth we get a majority? The last budget was an election-triggering event. A non-confidence vote was anticipated, and they prepped just in case. Carney campaigned on being the man to negotiate with Trump, but he also leveraged an assist from China with the Trump narrative. He's also never fixed that trade deal. Not only has it not been fixed, it appears to have been disrupted intentionally surrounding election-triggering events. The Ronald Reagan ad, which ran in the United States and undermined Trump's own policy to his own people, was right before the budget, and Doug Ford let the cat out of the bag when he told reporters Carney and his chief of staff had reviewed this beforehand. Carney has a perceivable history of shifting onus slightly off of himself. You can see that with the MOU with Danielle for pipelines, because as the prime minister, he can override any opposition and put a pipeline through, but he's shifting the onus to Indigenous, same way he shifted the onus to Ford. And you and I know he has a PhD, and when he viewed that ad, he knew exactly what that ad would do. November 25th, 2025, he was asked by reporters how trade negotiations were going with the US, and he replied, "Who cares?" I'm showing you right now that he actually doesn't. So it looks like a spring election is on the menu. Since there's an anticipated spring election, the China deal just shows up. Considering that your prime minister, Canadian intelligence, the US president, the CIA, all state that China is the greatest security threat to both countries. Considering the US collects 75% of our total export and China collects 3.4%, why on earth would you publicly announce a trade deal with China right before another potential election, which disrupts trade with the United States and consequently reignites the original narrative that they leveraged from the Chinese Communist Party that they won on? Unbelievably, it's working. If you use the Bayesian interference theorem to calculate likelihood based on a succession of events, the timing being preceding election triggering events, the result being tariffs applied at 10% and a threat of 100% the second time, the posterior, which is the ad that was ran before the budget, gets upgraded from a 50-50 neutral stance to 98%, which from my calculation and observation, Mark Carney is intentionally disrupting trade with the United States to ride that coattail right into a majority, to the absolute detriment of the entire country. China is not just another trade partner. It is a fascist, authoritarian structure with a documented record of repression, mass rights violations, and a system that treats dissent as a threat to be neutralized, not debated. Against that backdrop, the timeline shows information operations touching Canadian politics, campaign controversies involving China-linked issues, and repeated moments where US trade negotiations get derailed, followed by specific election-triggering events. Now with the USMCA review imminent and Canada's export dependency overwhelmingly tied to the United States, Carney chooses Beijing. By the words interpreted in his own book, will do anything to get that majority because that means total control. And when and if he does, Canada will be gone. There is no such thing as coincidences.